with the industry, I'm going to bring out some of our cast and crew. So, let's welcome Solomon, Asa Butterfield. Of course, we have our hero, Jaeden Martell. We have Pippa Knowles. We have our director, writer, producer, Oscar Boyson. And last but not least, our writer and producer, Ricky Camilleri. All right, fantastic. So, Oscar.
Hi, everybody.
All these roles are very unique, and I think for the most part very different from what these guys have played before. So I'm curious if you could tell me what you saw, if it was an audition or a piece of material that you saw that convinced you that each of them could kind of take on these roles.
Yeah. I haven't seen all of your movies, guys, but I had seen enough, and I think there's something that you're drawn to physically on the exterior, and then you see the work. I have a tremendous trust in actors in general. You know that they're actors. They can do it just because you don't see exactly what you imagine the character to be. When you watch their other movies or when you see their photos, doesn't mean that they have great trust that they can find it and actually that's when it gets really fun because they surprise you, right? They show you something that wasn't on the page and something that you never thought of once they start saying the lines. So, but really, we brought Jaeden in first and then Asa a few months later we met, and I think more than anything, it was just like a trust that that they understood the material, that they wanted to do something different, that they wanted to be pushed, that they wanted to take risks, that they wanted to join me on this adventure where I could be really honest about wanting to push it, and not wanting to feel like when it was done, we hadn't taken things as far as we could. And they both really rose to the occasion. Pippa was actually the last person to be cast. And by far the most people auditioned for her role. So when you write a high school girl character, every single woman auditions for that role. So I think she was one of like 200 people. So, and this is her first movie. So let's give it up for Pippa.
So Jaeden, I have to start with you because you were the first to audition for this. So I'm curious, what scenes were the ones you read, and what did you kind of identify in the material?
I didn't audition.
I just said, can you cry? And he was a Zoom.
Bro, Jaeden doesn't audition. Bro, come on, man.
All right.
No, I read the script, also all the scenes basically. Which what the script is all the scenes together in one document. So I read that and I met with these guys and I fell in love with them immediately. We were talking about music and movies we like, and hit it off. But it's hard to find partners you trust that you want to join an endeavor with. These are the guys.
What would you say resonated with you about the screenplay when you read it?
Well, all the scenes,
Yeah. I related to all of it. No, I the first selfish thing you look for is this a fun character to play? And is it challenging, kind of? And then I just knew that I knew what they were saying with the subject matter, but I had to make sure that they could deal with it delicately and properly and thoughtfully and intentionally. And it was clear when talking that they were the guys to do that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, obviously you guys dealt with it in a very extreme, interesting, and thoughtful way. So I'm curious.
I would also just add, like, when I go to a movie, it's so exciting when you see somebody whose work you've seen before give you something totally different, right? Like that that's a gift to the audience. And I love being the audience that receives that gift when I get to see an actor who I know has some moves give me something totally different. And I knew that was possible with both of these guys. They really wanted it too. And I had one idea of what that would be when we started talking about the role, but then when we started rehearsing, it was like, wow, because they're both together, the chemistry was even something, neither of us could have ever imagined.
Yeah, Asa, so I'm curious, in the rehearsal process, what do you think was your largest discovery about your character?
That's a good question.
He's a really good driver.
Yeah, driving on the other side of the road was really hard. I think it was almost his unpredictability. I think we did so much discovering in that rehearsal process, and sort of finding the different shades of Solomon, and finding that a lot of them kind of made sense. And then how did he flip between them? His excitement. He has these really big highs, but then he also has these crushing lows. And seeing how he can flip between that like a switch was quite fun. And that was definitely a big discovery in the rehearsal process.
Fantastic. And then Oscar and Ricky, I'm curious if you guys could talk about what your discovery was about kind of the dynamics that you were talking about earlier in the rehearsal process.
Well, I mean, going off of what Asa just said, I remember when we were shooting, Oscar likes to, and I as the, co-writer and they're on set, like to see things, to see different shades of the character that, may or may not make it in. We just want to see different things. And watching the movie the other day, when Solomon helps his grandmother off the toilet, Asa, do you remember? We were just going like, be really fucking mean to her. Like, you are so mad at her that she didn't listen to you in the past and she went to the bathroom on her own. And there were all these takes of you being like, Grandma, you fucking bitch. And like, we kind of had to see it to be like, all right, let's dial it back. Maybe we're not going to go there. And then there was also your psycho laugh that you did, which you like came up with during rehearsal, and you just kept throwing it into every scene. And now I think it's in the movie like once, right?
It's
but like
his cackle. Yeah.
Yeah, he'd come up to us and be like, is this one where you do the laugh?
He's always like, no. Not today.
But it goes back to what Oscar said, and we've been saying this a lot, or at least I have. Oscar is just, as a director, is an incredible manager of personalities, which is really the greatest, outside of perseverance, is the sort of single biggest asset of a great director. And everybody on set, including me, who whispered some of the dumbest jokes to these guys to try to do, you're just allowed to try things and fail, and then come out on the other side and be like, wow, we got this incredible, all these amazing ingredients now to put a movie together, and no one feels bad about having tripped and fell on set because we were given the freedom to do so. And I think that's what pushed the performances to such a great place. It pushed the material to such dark, funny, and tragic places, because you have this guy here who would never, ever, ever do what I would do, which is immediately think about how that couldn't work and be like, I don't think we're gonna do that. Oscar like, yeah, give it a try, see how it goes. And never make you feel bad if it didn't work. And that's just like just a testament, I would say, to his patience.
I'll also add that it's always a beautiful surprise. I mean, I especially remember with Jaeden the first time that we put a cinema lens right up close in his face, and I was like, oh wow, there's some stuff I didn't know was going on when we first talked in person. So that was special, kind of finding the lens with each of you guys.
Yeah, but tracking back to the bathroom scene, I think it's actually really smart, either the take you chose or how you end up finding it in rehearsal, because it allows us to really kind of empathize with your character early on, which is going to be crucial if we're going to get on board with the movie. So yeah, I think that was really wise of how you guys developed that. Question for Ricky and Pippa. There's a really interesting line very early. I'm going to repeat it verbatim. This doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. It's only in America when we have such easy access to guns, coinciding with a zero-sum economy and the monetization of narcissism, all of which push hopeless, lonely people, kids into an annihilation mentality. Okay, so
That's what most of the auditions sounded like, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, don't
Stepped on my
cast
joke. I
me.
was gonna say that was Pippa's improv.
I tried to do a flat read on it for you. So I'm curious because that line I think really speaks to much of what is going on in the movie. So I'm curious if there was a concern about giving that line away so early in the movie, but then also too how you, I guess, beat out 200 people and delivered that line.
Go ahead.
That
You know what? I'll answer it for you, actually.
Go for it, go for
Go
it.
ahead. Go ahead.
That was one of my audition scenes. And that came in, and I was like, holy yap fest, Jesus Christ. And I was a junior in high school, so I had to deal with like academics, and I'm like a dancer and blah, blah, blah. But I was like, this audition came in, and I was like, I actually really like this, and I'm excited to memorize this. And I had to like connect what a lot of the words meant. I connected it with my mom, who's over there. Hi, Mom, I love you. But I think the way I did it in my audition was very similar to how I did it in like the final cut. I think Eleanor and I are very similar. So it kind of was like, it wasn't a flat read, obviously, but it was just like blah, 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 blah. Yeah, like obviously, duh. Yeah.
I think for us, there's a few lines kind of like that in the movie. That one being maybe the number one culprit. That I think someone could watch the movie and say that's a little on the nose or that's heavy-handed, but like to Oscar and I in the writing process, there was always, when we came across a moment like that or dialogue like that, you know, we would talk it out, and if it ended up going in the movie, it was because it felt like, well, we have to be honest to the material and honest to what the movie is, and we can't, you know, remove this. And then we also thought it was so funny to put the moral center of the movie into the eyes of someone who's going to completely fuck it up and misunderstand it. You know, so you have this kind of like, maybe thematically it's what the movie is trying to say, but that is definitely not where the movie goes. And so that always kind of felt like we could say this thing that maybe is how we feel, but if we undermined it with our lead, it would be okay. You know, it wouldn't feel like we were preaching.
It'll cancel it out, we're fine.
I also think it's really smart how it's edited because our attention is totally taken off the line because Jaeden kind of falls for this girl in that moment. So the way that you've constructed it, I think, kind of de-emphasizes the line being like super preachy. There's a lot of really good use of point of view. I mean, throughout the movie, but that in particular.
And also the other kids in the class are kind of rightfully irritated with her. They just want to get the fuck out of this stupid seminar, and she's talking to this guy, and they're all like, oh my God, Eleanor, we have to do this all the time, you know, which is also, it's kind of fun. It's fun to create a character who's the moral center of the movie and have everybody around them being annoyed by them.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Something, I would say I had a lot of favorite scenes in the movie, but probably my favorite is Jaeden, when you're teaching Asa to be performative and cry. I think it's kind of a tremendous reversal there. So I'm curious if you could talk about kind of that dynamic, and maybe even you guys too, about how you kind of constructed that and then how you guys brought it to these guys.
Do you want to talk about how you wrote it, or don't?
I mean, it was one of my favorite. I just remember when we landed on that was gonna happen. I was so excited about it, and yeah, it was one of the ones where I had to kind of like fight this idea of how it was in my head and just let it become something else, in a good way.
I feel like that stretch of the movie was kind of the hardest part of the movie to write, because the setup, the usual setup for a movie like this, at that point you would get sort of like bonding montage, where like Royal Tenenbaums, where Tenenbaum takes the kids out on the trash truck into the dog fights and stuff, and these guys really become friends, and we just were so adamant that we didn't want to do that in this movie, that wasn't this type of movie, but we just kept kind of hitting a wall and being like, but what do you do here if you don't do that? There's a reason every movie does that. And then we came up with that, and we were like, of course, that makes sense too, we could do that, and we were really happy that we didn't have to do the corny ass montage.
It's true, but that's kind of one of the few scenes where I'm having a good time a little bit, or I'm sort of nonchalant about the whole thing, and I have my little big gulp or whatever, and it's all fun and games, and it's the first time I'm kind of forgetting my purpose.
Someone's
Which is
stroking
probably why
your
you
ego.
like it, or is that some kind of release?
And for someone, it's like he actually feels like they're bonding at that point as well. They're sharing something. He's teaching him something,
That's the
showing
sad
the dad
part,
the video
too.
of his dad, and then he's like, all right, now you give me something back. And it's this kind of, tragic.
You guys are so good. When Balthazar gets a little taste of, see, we're friends. That just always makes me so happy, your expression and yours, because you guys are both kind of hitting a different, the tables are starting to turn.
I'm glad that you brought up the watching the porn thing. One of my favorite Letterboxd reviews that we've seen from this movie out of, was it the New Hampshire Film Festival? Was that someone said they heard a woman in the bathroom being like, I just don't know what's funny about someone being excited to watch a porn with their father. And they were like really offended, and the person's Letterboxd review was like, it's that good, 5 stars.
I love that. Tracking back a little bit to the friendship between you two, something on a rewatch that struck me a lot was the scene where you actually go to shoot, before you go to shoot your dad, and it's when you kind of load up out of the car, and the way that you look at Jaeden, it's like, it's very, very beautiful, I think, what you found in that moment, because it's almost like a very deep friendship. I mean, it's like, there's a lot of neglect going on in the full movie, and I think in that moment, you kind of think that's going to be the end of it for you, but you find something really beautiful kind of in that hug, so I'm curious if you could talk about how you guys kind of arrived at that.
Grab too.
Yeah, and that's be a hero. That moment with the it was that was a tough day. I mean, it's that this guy has sort of resigned to this fate which he didn't want, but he feels like he has to do, and it's tragic. And despite that, he still thinks that Balthazar helped him get there, and that this is how the cards. This is kind of his destiny almost. It's a weirdly sad and sweet and disturbing scene.
I'll also just add that, we tend to overwrite things and then remove them, but it comes from a place of just wanting everybody to know why they're doing what they're doing. But originally and on set, you have the line, I love you. And I think because the performance was so good, we just quickly realized we didn't need that. It's so much more interesting to just look at your face.
There's also the sense with both of these characters where they're putting so much of their wishes and what they want into the other one, and the other one doesn't exactly have those things that they're imagining that they have. So yes, it is a beautiful moment that Solomon is able to finally hug somebody, but he's hugging the wrong person. And that's so much of what the movie is about in a lot of ways, which is putting all of your feelings and all of your action into something that isn't giving anything back to you.
Absolutely. Ricky, one of my favorite lines in the movie is, I sort of start crying and I can't stop until I stop recording. And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about that and some of the ideas behind that for you.
I used to be a TV host, and this is the truth. That's the truth, that's not what I meant. The line came from this feeling sometimes that I had where I would be really, really nervous every time that I would get on stage to talk to someone, and I would be like, I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna talk to them about. I didn't like their stupid movie. I don't like their dumb. I don't want to talk to young Sheldon. Oh my god, this is gonna suck. No offense, Ian Sheldon. But then the cameras would start rolling, and I have a microphone in my hand, and I would just be able to do it for 30 minutes, and I would talk to them, and I would pull questions out, and I'd bullshit really well. And I think that's where that line came from for me. And maybe it doesn't mean anything to these guys as actors or to the movie at all, but it was just this sort of general feeling that once the record button started, you could just turn, if you're a certain type of person, you can just turn it on. and all the thought and all the paranoia and all the anxiety goes away, and that's your superpower. I don't think I've had a superpower. Please don't take that as arrogance. But, and that's where that line came from for me. That might be a bad answer because I don't think it answers any questions about the movie.
Well, I guess your motivations behind the line, and which I like.
Everything is selfish and narcissistic on my side over here.
Sounds like you're Balthazar. Wow.
Someone,
I didn't know that until now, and it clicked.
But the first AD on set in Texas came over to me like a week into the shoot, and he went, "Ah, I get it. You're Solomon. Oscar's Balthazar." And I went, "Shut up." I walked away. It's like, shut up and do your job, dude. I was so annoyed.
Right what you know, right what you know.
Oscar, I would love to
Deep
hear
thoughts.
what the hardest scene was to shoot.
I think that the scene you were just talking about, the embrace in the parking lot before they go into the Thrush conference, or don't go in, they get held up. That was the hardest for me. Nobody's told me that in Dallas they have these the season of storms and lightning, and it just screwed up our day already. We had to do that on the third day of the shoot in order to make actor schedules work, which was also just so far from ideal.
Bauer had just landed that day, I think, or maybe the night before, right?
Yeah. You just, we'd gotten out, we rehearsed for 2 weeks. It was just the four of us and the DP. We had this really like kind of beautiful thing going, feeling very trusting, and then suddenly we just had 5 or 6 forks thrown into our day. And I have a really good sense of what we need and what we don't, and it just was the one day where I was like, oh my God, it's not gonna happen, and it's gonna turn everything into shit.
Do you remember the funniest thing though about that day was that, like, you know, in between takes we're all standing around and Ace is standing around holding AR-15 and the helmet and the vest.
I remember one of the takes, the moment where I go up to the door and they're locked,
Someone
and I start rattling on this door. And I look at the glass, and there's like a kid and their family looking at me. And I'm like, guys, like we cut like this looks so.
Yeah, we didn't have permission to be inside there, so.
I remember you kind of like walking around the parking lot in that outfit and with the gun, and like Texas people just being like, hey.
So Oscar, because I know we're probably closing in on time, but how did you end up dealing with the fact that you're the 4 or 5 forks? Did you cut your shot list in half? And you just talk about like what you ended up doing to kind of make the day.
Dealing with the what?
You said there were like 4 or 5 forks that day.
Oh yeah, I mean, just the weather is so unpredictable, and when lightning strikes, everyone has to stop working for safety. And that day in particular, the sky exploded. Is anyone from North Texas? Yeah, Houston, right? Yeah. I'd never seen anything like it. It was nighttime at noon. It was dark enough to shoot a night scene at noon. And I was just like, we are so screwed. But then we got this weird gift, which was that it looked like it was 4 o'clock until like 9 p.m. at night, because all the light just held in the clouds, which I'd also never seen anything like. So it was a total panic, and then suddenly the last hour of the day sort of expanded into 5 hours. So we kind of got it back.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much for the movie. It's extremely interesting. It's pretty incredible. And yeah, thanks so much for everything for it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming, guys.
You want to say something?
Thanks for coming, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for watching.
Yes, if you like the movie, please tell your friends about it. It really means so much to us.
Review it on Letterboxd. I'm serious, dude.